13.
There we go.
3, 2, 1,
26.
and we're on.
Chapter 11,
Chapter 11,
verse
26.
126. Verse
All right.
11, 26.
Well, we're running a little bit behind here, guys. So be patient as we get ready to go. I'm going to run down and do what somebody else usually does for me, so be patient with me. For those of you on tape or on Facebook Live, my talk tonight while everybody was eating was on a legal term called the fruit of the poisonous tree. And we took that legal term and we talked about how that affects our spiritual life, whether it's in a church, in a ministry, or in our own private spiritual life. It's an interesting concept, and I think most people don't understand it. Whenever I teach on the fruit of the Spirit, I always try to teach on the positive side. I try to teach the Bible, and I try to teach how God looks at the fruit of the Spirit. But when you look at the secular view of the fruit of the Spirit, the secular way to look at it is exactly that legal term, the fruit of the poisonous tree. You can't run a ministry, you can't run a church, and you can't run your spiritual life if there is poison in your ministry. So that's what we talked about while everybody was eating tonight. By the way, before we get started tonight, I want to say thank you to, if somebody knew who cooked dinner?
Karen and her group, her team of cooks.
Karen and her team of cooks cooked chicken and noodles and rice and spinach and corn and biscuits, and it was awesome. So thank you. All right, as we get started, where are we at now?
11, 26.
No, what book?
First Kings.
1 Kings, chapter 11.
1 Kings chapter 11,
Verse 26.
verse 26. Oh, Jeroboam's rebellion. Okay, somebody want to read there? 1 Kings chapter 11, verse 26.
Then Solomon's servant, Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, I apologize in advance for the misspellings or mispronunciations, Ephraimite from Zerubah, whose mother's name was Zerah, the widow, also rebelled against the king. And this is what caused him to rebel against the king. Solomon had built the Milo and repaired the damages to the city of David his father. The man Jeroboam was a mighty man of valor, and Solomon, seeing that a young man was industrious, made him the officer over all the labor force of the house of Joseph. Now it happened at that time, when Jeroboam went out of Jerusalem, that the prophet
Ahijah
and Shilonite, or the Shilonite, met him on the way. And
Okay, hang on just a minute. I can't really hear you. Let's wait a minute.
Was that how you, Shilonite?
Shilonite. Mike.
It's an N. Shilonite, right?
Where are we at?
Verse 29. Then thereafter it says the prophet Ahijah,
Shilonite, yes, you're right.
Shilonite. I said, man, whatever happened to Bob Umbrella?
Yeah, no kidding.
You know,
Okay, go ahead.
met him on the way, and he had clothed himself with a new garment, and the two were alone in the field.
Did you set the timer, by the way?
25
Yeah.
on this one.
Yeah.
Then Ahijah took hold of the new garment, that was on him and tore it into 12 pieces.
Why do you think he tore it into 12 pieces?
12 tribes.
That's exactly right. Go ahead.
And he said to Jeroboam, take for yourself 10 pieces, for thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, behold, I will tear the kingdom out of the hand of Solomon, and will give 10 tribes to you. But he shall have 1 tribe for the sake of my servant David, and for the sake of Jerusalem, the city which I have chosen out of the tribes of Israel. Because they have forsaken me and worshipped,
Ashtaroth.
thank you, the goddess of Sidonians,
Chemosh.
Chemosh, the god of the Moabites, and Malcolm, the god of people of Ammon, and have not walked in my ways to do what is right in my eyes, and keep my statutes and my judgments, as did his father David.
Okay, hang on a minute. So what's going on here?
God's finally
Solomon
starting to
just
correct.
lost a lot of stuff.
He's starting to correct the things that went wrong.
Oh, yeah.
Because Solomon went and started, because of his women.
Started following those other gods.
Okay, so God is giving a prophecy here of what's going to happen
Thank you.
physically, and he's doing it in a spiritual manner. Remember, David brought together the 12 tribes of Israel. He built the country, and God expanded the boundaries. They turned their back on God, and they worshiped these other gods. 2 of them are sex gods. I don't know what the other one is. And God said, because they've turned their back on me, and from this point forward, we're going to end up having 2 separate countries. The 12 tribes are not going to be together anymore. They're going to be separate. Can you see that?
Where are you? There you are.
Right. So that now we're going to have 2 countries. Now it's going to be tricky as we go forward, and you're going to have to pay attention, because he's going to say the king of Israel and the king of, I don't remember the other one, Judah maybe. And he's going to, the writer's going to bounce back and forth before countries to know which king is which. But this is the beginning of where God is going to tear that country into 2 pieces. Okay? And he's given us the reason why, because they worshiped other gods. He's told us how he's going to do that. He's going to give 10 tribes to one and 2 to the other. All right?
And he only did that with the 2 just in honor of David.
Correct. Okay, where do we leave off?
Verse 34.
Go ahead.
However, I will not take the whole kingdom out of his hand, because I have made him ruler all the days of his life for the sake of my servant David, whom I chose because he kept my commandments and my status. Can I comment on that?
Sure.
What I like about this and the way it fits in my life is I am trying every day to be the best I can, to be the man God wants me to be, but I am nowhere close. But I think I'm doing exactly what he wants me to do. And I reassure myself with this with David. David found favor with him. And we all know the things that David did,
Right.
all the way to murder,
Right.
you know. So this part of Scripture just gives me so much reassurance. So much reassurance. I just had to share that.
Right. No, I agree. Absolutely.
Verse 35. But I will take the kingdom out of his son's hand and give it to you, 10 tribes.
Okay, so God is saying, here's what I'm going to do, but I'm not going to do it as long as Solomon is alive. I made a promise, I'm going to keep my promise, but as soon as he dies and his son takes over, I'm going to take 10 of them and take it away from him. And just just so you understand, this is an example of the sins of the father being visited upon the son,
Yeah.
okay?
It trickled down.
Now, there are many, many preachers today that will tell you that doesn't exist anymore. And I think in some instances that is true, in other instances it is not. As an example, in the Old Testament, God tells one family, and I can't remember the exact story, but he tells him that your family from now till the end of time is going to be cursed. Now, when he says that, that means from the time that he made that, all the way through Jesus, all the way through today, and all the way till the end of time. So we know that it still exists. A lot of times, the sins of the father are visited upon the son genetically. As an example, let's say the father is a carrier of Parkinson's disease. He may or may not have Parkinson's, but that genetic code goes from carrier to carrier to carrier. And at some point, somebody's going to get Parkinson's disease. The secular world will tell you that's genetics. Who invented genetics?
Let me see. G-O-D.
Yeah. Yep. So, it may not be the same way that everybody wants to think about it. How many of you have ever heard the term genetic predisposition?
That's a mouthful.
Okay. Genetic predisposition is this. I'll give you two examples. Alcoholism. The person who is an alcoholic, the chances are very, 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 very high that one of their parents was an alcoholic. And if you track it back, the possibility that one of their parents was an alcoholic is very, 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 very high. Another example would be men beating on women. When you find that, you will find that the odds of the dad beating his mom was very, 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 very high. And if you go back another generation, same thing. That is known as a genetic predisposition. Now, you'll have others that will argue and say, no, that's learned behavior. Okay, we can have that discussion.
Comes from somewhere.
But it came from somewhere and it started from somewhere. So, this is an example of the sins of the father, Solomon and the people, being visited upon the son. You can agree, disagree, you can say Old Testament versus New Testament, but here it is. And here's my defense whenever anybody wants to argue that with me. God is the same yesterday, today, and forever.
Amen.
He doesn't change just because you don't like it. He doesn't change because you're a white American versus a Middle Eastern. He doesn't change because you have money or you don't have money. God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And if he did it here, he'll do it today, and he'll do it 2,000 years from now. Okay? The key to remember is don't ever try to put God in a box. Don't ever try to defend that God will never do something, because that is wrong. God can do what God chooses to do. And I'll tell you something, in the years that I have been ministering, and I did this, and most people that I know that have gotten saved have made some type of prayer of this without even realizing what it meant. And the prayer goes something like this. Lord, my life has really stunk up to this point. I want you to break all the chains in my life so I can start over. Now, I did that prayer. I didn't really know what it meant. 15 years later, I can tell you that's a real deep, complicated OMG prayer. Because when you say break the chains, that means break the genetic chains, break the familial chains, break the emotional chains, break the psychological chains, break the emotional chains, break all of that, and make me your son. A lot of us are guilty of looking at a person's behavior and saying, there's no way they can be Christian and behave like that. We've all done that, okay?
I still do it.
But when you look at that person and they are in this spot, again, don't judge them, judge the behavior. Whatever the behavior is. And then look at it over time. A person who is got whatever behavior you think a Christian should not have, you don't know where they came from. If they came from a family that constantly, the dad was a drunk, unemployed, beats his wife, beats his kids, and is just a low-down piece of crud human being, and this person, you know, may have some of those traits, but is fighting very, very hard. But what you see is a guy that drinks a lot. And you say, well, no Christian could drink a lot and still be a Christian.
No, wrong.
You don't know where they came from. You know, when my first wife died, I went off the deep end, and I went on a 3-year drunk, and I was just a lousy human being. And my dad was judging me harshly and doing a lot of harsh things to me. And my uncle, who had lost his first wife to breast cancer, chastised my dad. And he said, yeah, he's doing all those things. And my dad said, well, by God, I'm not standing for that. I'm not going to contribute to that. And my uncle pointed his finger at my dad and said, until you walk a mile in his shoes, you don't do or say anything. You have no idea what he's going through. You have no idea where he came from.
Quit. Sit there.
Elijah.
Yeah. Nobody does.
So when we talk about the sins of the father, keep it in perspective. I'm not saying that's exclusively how God operates. I'm saying that's an option of how God operates. All right? Okay, everybody, Shannon and Iona are watching. Tell them hi.
Hi.
Hi, Iona. Hi, Shannon. Okay, where did we leave off?
I think we're starting in verse 36 now.
Okay, somebody start.
And to his son I will give one tribe, and my servant David may always have a lamp before me in Jerusalem.
Now, why is that important? Why does God do that?
Again, David found favor. Yeah.
Well, because God made a promise.
Promise, I was gonna say, he made a promise to David that he would have,
And what was the promise?
that he would rule over.
That he would keep somebody on the throne from his lineage all the way through. Because when we go back and we trace the lineage of Mary and her husband and Jesus, all three of those come through the lineage from the tribe of David, which is very interesting, actually. If you think about, we're going to cover a period of about 2,000 years here, okay, in history. And women were not thought of very highly back then. They traced the lineage by the male. If you look at the lineage from David to Jesus, there are 2 or 3 females in that lineage, and one of them is a whore, Rahab. She's in the lineage of Jesus. And when you get to Mary and Joseph, and you track back both of them, both of them, their lineage came from the line of David. And the reason God did that is he wanted to make sure that nobody could say, yeah, but Mary wasn't from the line of David. You're only half right. So God made sure that both Mary and Joseph both came from that line. Now remember, and I just want to give you the odds here, and I don't know the number, but remember we had Adam and Eve, and they had X amount of sons. we followed one son out of all of them. And then we followed him all the way through Moses. Then everybody got wiped out. Then Moses had 3 or 4 sons, and we followed one of them. And we followed that line all the way to David. The other sons we don't follow. The daughters we don't follow. We follow one line all the way to David. Now we're going to bounce back and forth between kingdoms, but the key here is to keep your eye on the one line that's going to go all the way. Now, when we start the New Testament, what's the first book in the Bible, in the New Testament?
Matthew.
Matthew. And what do they do in the first chapter of Matthew? Right? Chapter 1. They establish the lineage of Jesus from David to now. Matthew is a book to the Jews, okay, written by a Jew. And the purpose of that book is to say, look, this guy is the Messiah. And his lineage goes straight back to David, which fulfills the scripture. What we're doing here, this is the beginning of that lineage. Okay? All right. So where did we leave off?
Right there, at the end of 36.
Okay, go ahead.
A lamp before me in Jerusalem, the city which I have chosen for myself, to put my name there. That's why to this day, we got to stand with Jerusalem.
Yep, that's right.
So I will take you, and you shall reign over all your heart desires, and you shall be king over Israel. Then it shall be, if you heed all that I command you, walk in my ways, and do what is right in my sight, to keep my statutes and my commandments, as my servant David did, then I will be with you, and build for you an enduring house, as I built for David, and will give Israel to you.
Okay, I want to stop here.
That's a heck of a promise.
Now, and here's the interesting thing. Let me ask you a couple of questions. How many of you have lied before? Okay. How many, well, I won't ask that, there's only two or three men here. How many of you have slandered another individual?
The what?
Slander, said bad words about people.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, somewhere in my time.
How many of you have committed adultery in your mind? Okay. So right here,
Although if I'm cheating.
so right here,
Oh, okay.
you have admitted in public that you're a lying, cheating murderer. Because slandering is murdering somebody else's spirit. You just violated and admitted to violating 3 of the 10 commandments.
Yep.
All right? Now, we know David committed murder. We know that he committed adultery. We know that he had multiple wives. We know that he had sex with many women outside of marriage. So we know that he did a lot of bad things. Now I want you to go back and read that sentence again. Let me do it. Let me do it.
Oh, go ahead.
So I will take you, and you shall reign over all your heart's desires, and you shall be king over Israel. Then it shall be, if you heed all that I command you. Did he command him to commit murder on Uriah? Did he command David to commit adultery with Bathsheba?
No.
No. But here he says, walk in my ways and do what is right in my sight, to keep my statutes and my commandments. Did he keep God's commandments? David? No.
David? No.
As my servant David did.
But David did.
Explain that. We know David didn't keep the commandments, but here God says, keep them as my son David did.
It's just what I talked about Sunday. When we fall as Christians trying to do our best to be righteous, and we stumble, and we will stumble, we can get back on the path. Father, forgive me, I have sinned. and he knows, and he tells us, go on.
You're exactly right, but Jesus hasn't come here.
No,
This is the law. There's no forgiveness here. The only thing is there is atonement, which means sacrificing animals. That's not forgiveness.
yeah,
Nobody goes to heaven in the Old Testament.